Hey guys, tonight we journey back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile, to a civilization known for pyramids, pharaohs and gods that watched your every move. But behind the gold masks and grand temples lies a much harsher reality today. We're asking what would happen if you lived just one day in ancient Egypt. Because let me tell you, the sun isn't the only thing that will roast you alive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you retuning in from and what time it is for you. Let's journey together. Welcome to. It is always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Before now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum and let us ease into tonight ancient. Egypt, land of pyramids, gods, and relentless ultraviolet violence. You even open your eyes. The sun is already blasting through your reed hut, like it as auditioning for the role of unforgiving sky god. There are no curtains, no shades, and certainly no air conditioning, just the raw, unforgiving heat of the desert, baking everything, including you, by breakfast. You're lying on a straw mat with a linen sheet that's more suggestion than protection. The Nile breeze you were promised in all those travel documentaries? Yeah, it's gone. Probably died sometime around 2800 BC. By the time you stumble outside, the temperature is already flirting with 90 F or around 32 C, and it's not even mid-morning. The sun doesn't just shine in ancient Egypt, it attacks your linen tunic useless. You might get a little relief hiding, like wearing tissue paper in a sauna, and don't even think about sunscreen. There is no aloe vera, no SPF 50, not even a floppy, and you better not complain, Ray the sun god, you on the other. By midday, the stones under your feet are hot enough to cook. Hat with a logo from a beach resort, ancient Egyptians did have protective oils, but unless you were wealthy or work in a temple, you're not getting any of it. Your best option, smear yourself with mud. And this is, or crocodile dung, which apparently might keep you from turning into a human. Torch emphasis on light lentil shade, as the luxury trees are rare. Behind a mud brick wall, but even that wall is sweating by now. And the good news is the Nile is just a short walk away. The banks are buzzing with flies, frogs, and things that. The bad news, you can already smell it, hand look. Like someone threw you into a clay oven and forgot to set a timer. Instead, you lather yourself in that is watching. And in ancient Egypt, the sun wasn't just weather, it was divine. Authority. The hotter the day, the more powerful Rada was feeling. So basically, if you're melting, it's a spiritual compliment. And short surviving one day in ancient Egypt requires hydration, humility, and an ironclad tolerance for feeling like a roast chicken just the morning. You're finally out of bed, or rather off your scratchy straw mat. Before you see it, yes, the mighty Nile, the life giver of ancient Egypt, revered. If you're a city dweller in Memphis or Thebes, you might be lucky as sacred, the reason civilization here even exists. But let's be honest, it as a daily ritual, spiritual, necessary, it feeds you, cleans you, and in reality, it as part miracle, part biohazard. You've sandpapered yourself semi-clean and your smells like a fish market, had a bad breakup with a swamp. Probably shouldn't have legs, but do. Still, this is where you bathe soap. And do and expect hasn't been invented yet, and even if it had, you couldn't afford it. The centerpiece of your meal, bread lots, the most important and least freshest cleansing technology of the day. Sand, that's right, exfoliation, the you sit on. Egyptian way, just rub yourself down with coarse grains and call it skincare. It's like nature's sandpaper, but less effective. Washing clothes also done in the Nile, and by washing, we mean pounding them against rocks while praying that a crocodile doesn't mistake your laundry for a tasty midday snack. Oh, and do and be surprised if. Make things more fun, let's not forget the occasional sewage runoff from upstream. Remember, people, livestock, and the occasional funeral boat all share this river, and yet somehow this is a daily dose of considered clean. You scrub, rinse, and emerge feeling slightly less sticky and only moderately more worried about leeches. Enough to use a public basin or cistern, but for everyone else, it's Nile or nothing. Privacy. This is a public bathing space shared by families, neighbors, livestock, and the odd ibis pecking around your ankles like it pays rent. Water jars are filled and balanced on heads, carried back to your mud brick house before the midday heat turns the clay into toast and slightly traumatic. So yes, the Nile as sacred quenches your thirst, but let us not pretend is a sparkling oasis. And all you've got, by now you've bathed in the crocodile-fisted Nile body, feels like a baked fig. Time for breakfast glamorous meal of your ancient Egyptian day. Let's set expectations. There are no eggs, Benedict, no fruit bowls, and absolutely no iced lattes. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is less of a culinary event and more of a tactical refueling operation. Stole, if you have one or just squat in the corner like everyone else of it, dense coarse and often as chewy as a leather sandal. It's made from emma wheat or barley and baked in clay ovens that may or may not be shared by the local rats. There's sand in your slice, not as a topping, just an uninvited ingredient from the grinding stones. Minerals, you could say, then comes the beer. But don't get excited, this isn't. Crisp, bubbly craft ale. This is thick, cloudy, lukewarm liquid bread, more porridge than pint. It's packed with calories and vaguely fermented. A medieval smoothie with a faint taste of sour cereal and survival. Even children drink it. Not to be edgy, but because it's safer than water. At least the brewing process boils out the parasites, unlike the Nile, which we just... To go with your carbon foam combo protein, only if someone caught a fish disgust is basically a petri dish. If you're lucky, and we mean very lucky, you might get an onion or a few dried dates and didn't immediately eat it raw. And as you chew your rock-like loaf and sip your grain sludge, flies buzz around you like it's a buffet because it is for them. You swat at them with one hand, hold your cup with the other, and try not to think too hard about the fact that this is likely the best meal you will have today. Breakfast in ancient Egypt isn't about flavor, it's about function. It fuels your body just enough to survive until the next time someone hands you another sand-infused brick of bread. Bon appetit. You've had your gritty bread, your chunky beer, and just enough rest to call yourself functional. Now it's time to work, and trust me, ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout look like a spa day. Unless you're a scribe priest or royalty, which, let's be honest, you're not. Your job is pure muscle and dust, no air-conditioned cubicle, no coffee breaks, no ergonomic chairs, just sweat, sand, and a constant risk of collapsing before noon. If you're a farmer, you'll be ankle-deep in Nile, mud by sunrise yanking weeds, or planting barley under the eye of an overseer whose hobby seems to be yelling. You use wooden plows, crude sickles, and your bare hands. If your back hurts, congratulations. That means it's working. If you're a laborer, things get even more biblical. Imagine hauling multi-ton stones for... And if you mess up a temple construction under a blazing sun while barefoot up ramps made of gravel and prayer, there's no ocean here. You trip. That's a broken ankle and a shrug from the foreman. Working on tombs, that's another level of grind. You're hammering limestone, chiseling out burial chambers for people who will get to rest longer than you ever will. Your break is when the baby naps for 7 minutes. Pharaoh's tomb, let's just say job security, might involve a sealed chamber and a curse. And if you're a woman, you're not off the hook. Domestic work is also, and falling behind means physical labor. Grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, caring for kids. And there's no clocking out. The sun is your supervisor when it's still helping in the fields. While you prepare dinner, you eat on the go. You wipe sweat with your tunic, keep moving because slowing down means falling behind. Someone else gets your grain quota, and you get the blame. Finally sinks behind the horizon. You crawl home half alive, dust-caked, and he is the human embodiment dreaming of softer sandals and a less aggressive sun god work in ancient Egypt. As potentially treason. Why? Because your boss isn't just a ruler. In other words, if the river floods, well, this year, think isn't just hard. It's endless. It's a full body commitment to survival day after day. Until your body gives out or your overseer decides you're not worth Speaking ill of him could land. You a date with a whip, a set of shackles. Beating, and that's not even the worst of it. After sweating your soul out in the fields or quarry, you might be tempted to grumble. Maybe something small a little. You see his face everywhere on statues. If this job stinks, or why am I doing this again, stop right there. Because in ancient Egypt, complaining is unjust frowned upon, that as law and do and expect. He is a literal god, the pharaoh is, and some guy who got elected or born into a lucky family of Horus, son of Ra, chosen by the heavens to rule over Egypt and keep my hat divine cosmic order intact. The pharaoh. If it doesn't, well, maybe you didn't pray hard enough. Questioning his authority isn't just rude. It's blasphemy or an early trip to the underworld with none of your favorite burial goods. You. Temple walls, coins, even bread molds. His name is chanted in rituals. His image is painted larger than everyone else, as in every mural. That's not artistic exaggeration to ever see him. If you're a commoner, the closest you'll get is watching a golden bark float by during a religious festival blink, and he's gone. Back to a palace you'll never enter, surrounded by officials, guards, scribes, and enough gold to finance a small civilization, which, fun fact, he basically does. You're lucky enough to work on a royal project, say a tomb, a temple, or a statue. The size of a mountain you serve with divine joy, at least that's what the state says. You say it too because pretending you re-honored to carve. Stone for 14 hours a day is safer than the alternative, and don't even think about rebellion. Pharaohs crush uprisings faster than you can say. Dynasty, just ask the last village that tried to withhold taxes. Oh wait, you can't, it no longer exists. So yes, the pharaoh is divine, and you're just lucky to be allowed to sweat in his name. Now get back to work. If you thought surviving under the sun was hard, just wait until you realize that in ancient Egypt, sand is your roommate, co-worker, seasoning, and mortal enemy. It's everywhere, in your clothes, in your bed, in your food. There's no escaping it. Could be working, praying, sleeping, or minding your own business in the market, and suddenly a gust of hot wind sweeps by and turns your face into a grainy exfoliation experiment you didn't ask for. Let's start with the clothes. You wear linen, it's light, breathable, and it slides down your tunic, clings to you, about as effective at keeping sand out as a screen door is at holding back soup. Every loaf of bread is basically a sand trap, since flour was skin and somehow finds its way into places you didn't know had creases. Eating good luck ground between stone slabs, little bits of grit made their way into the dough. Egyptians didn't just eat their wheat, they ate their millstones too. It's why, and if you thought your house, your floors are covered your most. Ancient dental remains are often worn flat like river rocks. Imagine chewing your breakfast while also filing your MERS. Daily was a sand-free zone. Think again. Your mud brick home has gaps, crevices, and windows. Then there are sandstorms with no glass. Perfect portals for wind-blown sand. Cooking pots are full. Your bed is basically a sand pit disguised as furniture, shoes, optional at best. Egyptians walked barefoot, meaning you're always one step away from turning your feet into battered leather sandals. If you do have footwear, it's usually a basic pair of sandals made from reeds, fashionable perhaps. Protective, not remotely, Egypt's version of a slap from the gods, sudden swirling, blinding, one moment. You re-talking to a friend, the next you re-spitting dust and feeling like someone dumped an entire beach into your all dictated by gods, who seem to have very specific opinions. Eye sockets, visibility drops to zero, and everyone around you turns into vaguely coughing silhouettes. In short, sand is the roommate who never leaves the spice. In every meal, and the silent enemy of your eyes, lungs, and dignity. It's not just the backdrop of your life, it's part of your body now, and no, you can't wash it off. Your daily routine revolves around pleasing them. You already tried in the Nile, which is probably full of more sand, and before meals, you offer a bit of food to the gods before. Ancient Egypt religion isn't just a weekend activity. It is the operating system for everything. Your job, your diet, your hygiene routine, your bedtime rituals. First, understand this. The gods are everywhere. Your town has temples too. Speaking of the afterlife, ancient Egyptians took it very seriously. Even funerals are a dozen different deities, each responsible for some vital function. There's Re, who pilots the sun across the sky like it's a divine Uber. This headed god of wisdom is in charge of scribes and moon calendars. Sobek, part crocodile, part nightmare fuel, guards the Nile and Bastet. The cat goddess basically runs public relations. Forget personal freedom. Wake up, thank Rye, spill some beer, apologize to Heather, stub your toe, curse quietly, or risk attracting a spirit with a grudge. Bed you pray that Set, god of chaos, doesn't toss your house into existential disarray. Overnight, just do and expect it. You about to be healed with a combination of spells, herbs, and sheer multi-day affairs where the deceased must pass tests. Avoid demons and prove they were morally decent or risk eternal. First, you'll be taken to a doctor, and to be fair, they were some of the most advanced in the ancient world, because in Eurasia, you're re-given a pus made of honey. Honey actually is antibacterial, and mold has to just die and move on. You must pass a judgment process involving your heart being weighed against a feather of truth. If your heart's heavier because of lies, cruelty, or maybe stealing someone's goat, you're eaten by a mit, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion. It's your job description, your insurance plan, and your travel itinerary for the have a headache. You might get a dose and the legs of your worst nightmare. So yes, even in death, you're still on probation, but here's the twist. This complex belief system isn't depressing, but there's no anesthesia, just it happens sometimes. It's comforting. Egyptians believed life was part of a cosmic balance. And if you followed the rituals and upheld Mahat, the principle of truth and order, you had a chance at a peaceful eternity complete, with food, family, and maybe a boat. Of course, the richer you were, the more gods. Dentistry, not great, seemed to notice you. Temples were massive, priests were powerful peasants. Well, they just hoped the gods were feeling generous that day in ancient Egypt. Faith is an optional next life, so you've stepped on something sharp, got bit by something weird, or caught something contagious, which in ancient Egypt is basically Tuesday. Tend to seek medical care, waiting room, or a sterile environment optimism. They had surgical tools, medical texts, and a decent understanding of anatomy, but here as the catch science in ancient Egypt always came with a heavy dose of magic moldy bread and crushed herbs. Early penicillin properties, so it works sort of, but before applying it, the healer will chant a protective spell just to be safe. Because you never know when your stomach cramps are actually the result of a spiteful ghost or an angry god of crushed onions rubbed into your scalp while someone recites a hymn to the let's smear cow dung mixed with dates on your chest and see what happens. Eye infection, time for a paste of lizard blood, ochre, and beer, plus a prayer to Horus surgery. Abscesses were drained, bones were set, and wounds were stitched with linen thread, sharp knife, and a friend to hold. Your shoulders down while you scream into a mud brick pillow. Remember all that sand in the bread. Your teeth are worn down by your 20s. If one gets infected, your options are 1, live with it, 2, die from it, or 3, have it. And let's not forget the amulets. Whether pulled with something resembling pliers made by a blacksmith with low standards, you're giving birth, getting stitched up, or just sneezing too loud, a good doctor. So yes, Egyptian medicine had its moments, but mostly priests will probably hang a charm around your neck, just in case the real issue is an invisible serpent spirit curled around your spleen. You better believe in the gods, because your band-aid is literally a prayer. Here's a plot twist most people do and expect. Ancient Egyptian women had more rights than many women in later civilizations. They could own property, run businesses, file for divorce, and even sounds progressive, right? But before you pack your bags for take, a man to court a time-trained girl boss vacation hold up. Because while the legal status might impress you, the day-to-day reality not so glamorous. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, you probably wake up before sunrise, you're grinding grain, by hand using a giant flat stone that chews through both wheat and your spine. Then it is off to haul water from the Nile, cook breakfast, care for children, manage the household, feed animals, and if needed, help in the fields. You're a one-woman workforce in linen. There's no me time, no spa days, and definitely no maternity leave. Childbirth is risky, and the sun scorches your skin, the sand grinds. Painful midwives are helpful, sure, but there are no epidurals, no disinfectant. You give birth in a hot room with if and no push playlists featuring relaxing harps and sense prayers, and hopefully not too much bleeding. Let's talk fashion. Linen dresses are light and breathable, but there is no underwear and no shoes into everything, and the bugs think you're an all-you-can-eat buffet. Want. Now, if you're lucky enough to be born into a wealthy family, things are makeup grade Egyptian. Women did wear cosmetics, but it's lead-based and applied with sticks that look suspiciously like toothpicks. You made it through another grueling day in ancient Egypt better. You might read, write, manage estate accounts, or become a priestess. You're born royal. You could even become pharaoh, like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, who ruled with brilliance and terrifying eyeliner. But if you're poor, your status, because in ancient Egypt, it is just the beginning of an incredibly bureaucratic. Here may be legal, but your reality is physical. You work, sweat, bend, carry birth, bury and pray. You're not chained by law, but by survival. Still, Egyptian women had agency, and that mattered. They could speak in court, keep their inheritance, and didn't become property when they married. Compared to many ancient societies, that's huge. So yes, Egyptian women had rights, but comfort, that's reserved for statues and goddesses. Not the woman elbow deep in dough while swatting flies off a toddler. You ate your gritty bread, hold your buckets, avoided divine wrath, and maybe even dodged a sandstorm. Time to relax, right, wrong. One wrong confession, one forgotten. No afterlife, no second chances, just eternal enter Amit, part lion, part crocodile. If you do pass, your real test begins after you die. Death isn't the end. Multifaceted journey through the underworld. And if you thought the labor overseer was strict, wait until you meet the gods of judgment. First, your soul takes a trip to the Hall of Mahat before a tribunal of 42 deities. You must proclaim your innocence in what is basically the oldest legal deposition in one curse word, one unpaid. History, you say things like, I did not steal, I did not lie, I did not covet my neighbor's donkey. All while hoping the gods buy it. Then comes the heart test. Literally, your heart, believed to be the seat of the soul, is placed on a scale opposite the feather matat, the symbol of truth, justice, and balance. If your heart is heavier than the feather, well, that means thou lived a wicked life. Part hippo, all terrifying. She doesn't arrest you, she doesn't find you. She eats your soul, destroying it forever. Non-existence, which in a culture obsessed with eternity is the ultimate punishment, and it gets better. You can doom yourself not just by actions, but by words lined during your judgment, and boom. Spiritual obliteration, it's like an open book test, where failure means getting devoured by a mythological death hybrid. Congratulations. You get to enter the field of reeds, a peaceful, idealized version of Egypt, where your soul lives forever with boats, with crops, with family, and presumably with fewer sand fleas. But the stakes enormous. That's why Egyptians obsessed over tomb preparation. Funeral rites and magical texts like the Book of the Dead, a spiritual cheat sheet full of prayer spells and hopeful tips. Like, don't insult the crocodile god. So, yes, the afterlife might be beautiful, but only if you live your life very carefully. Temple tax, and your next stop is lunch for a meat. Sleep tight. If there's one small mercy in ancient Egypt, it's this linen, blessed, breathable linen. Your entire wardrobe and everyone else's is made from this plant-based fabric. It's light, cool, and lets your skin breathe in the scorching heat. That's the good news. The bad news, that's pretty much where the comfort ends. Whether you're a farmer, builder, priest, or vendor, you're wearing the same outfit every day. For men, a short white kilt or loincloth. For women, a straight sleeveless linen dress, sometimes held up by straps, sometimes not. If you're upper class, you might have pleat or beads or fancy patterns. If you're not, it's plain white or slightly grayish, depending on how long it's been since. Laundry day, oh, and laundry day. Your hand scrubbing your clothes in the Nile while hoping a hippo doesn't emerge. Mid-art, most people go barefoot. Sandals made from woven reeds or leather are reserved for special occasions or temple priests. So unless you're royalty, expect to spend your days with hot sand between your toes and possibly a sharp rock in your heel accessories. Absolutely, but mostly functional amulets for protection. Necklaces to show status and eye makeup made from powdered coal, which was in just for fashion. It helped reduce glare from the sun and supposedly warded off infections. Yes, even eyeliner had a job in ancient Egypt. But no matter how well you dress, the bugs don't care, flies, gnats, mosquitoes. They treat your airy outfit as an invitation. You're walking, and of course your outfit. Through the day, swatting constantly, rubbing on perfumed oils, and praying that your linen doesn't stick to you like a wet curtain the moment the sun reaches full strength. Doesn't change with the seasons because Egypt doesn't really have seasons, just hot and slightly less hot. But don't let the breezy outfits fool you, because no matter how floaty. So your linen ensemble is basically your year-round uniform, whether it's 110 or a chilly 70 evening. So yes, Egyptian clothing was light, elegant, and far more comfortable than what Romans would wear later. Your tunic feels your life is still heavy with labor heat, sand, and bugs that refuse to respect your personal space. You've survived another blistering Egyptian day, hauling bricks, dodging sandstorms, and praying your linen doesn't disintegrate mid-task. But in ancient Egypt, survival is always temporary, because no matter how tough you are, you probably won't live past 35. Let's break it down. If you make it past childhood, which is already an achievement considering if you get a fever, the best treatment is infant. Mortality rates were sky high. You're thrust straight into adulthood by age 13. They planned for it. In fact, they planned for it better than, but here as the twist, Egyptians were ent. Marriage, work, and child rearing all start early because, honestly, you'll be running out of time. You might die from heat stroke or an infected cut or childbirth or crocodiles or scorpion stings. Your body is your bad bread, and forget antibiotics. Honey herbs and hoping the gods do and have other plans for your soul scared of death. Most people plan for retirement today. If you're rich, you commission a tomb, the ancient version of a 5-star eternity suite. You start saving up grave goods, jewelry, food offerings, perfume statues, even tiny servant dolls called shabaptis. To do your chores in the afterlife, think of them as spiritual interns who work while you nap forever. No murals, no. Embalmed, wrapped in linen, stuffed with matron natural salt, and tucked neatly into a painted sarcophagus. You're reburied with a copy of the Book of the Dead, which is less about doom and more like a mystical travel guide, complete with passwords for the afterlife spells to confuse demons. But even the poorest Egyptians held onto instructions for not getting eaten by soul-devouring monsters. If you're poor, let's start with a simple truth. Tombs are full of expensive stuff, gold amulets. Well, your tomb is likely a shallow pit in the sand. Your body is wrapped in whatever fabric your family can spare, maybe a pot or two placed nearby and then covered with earth. All intended to be taken into the afterlife, because in Golden Mask, just you and the wind, the dream of the afterlife, a peaceful, fertile paradise called the Field of Reeds, where you farm without sweat, eat without hunger, and sail the Nile forever under gentle sunlight. So yes, you'll probably die young in ancient Egypt, but if you lived well, prayed right, and didn't insult too many jackal-headed gods, you just might spend eternity in style. You finally made in it to the afterlife, or at least into the tomb. You've been embalmed, wrapped, blessed, and buried time to rest in peace, right? Well, not exactly, but considering how ancient Egypt, even the dead get robbed, where especially gold and rare incense, the risk often seemed. Jewelry, perfumed oils, carved statues, chests full of linens, and for pharaohs, literal boatloads of treasure. But treasure in a tomb is basically an open invitation for someone with a chisel and bad. Intentions tomb robbery was so common that it became a full-time problem. Pharaohs tried to fight it by hiding their tombs deep in cliffs, locking them behind trapdoors, and scrawling terrifying curses on the walls. Things like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or "May your limbs be twisted forever by a serpent made of fire." Spoiler, the curses didn't work. Grave robbers came anyway at night in secret with inside knowledge. Sometimes they were locals. Sometimes they were corrupt workers who helped build the tombs. Some cases, even priests and guards were in on it. And the punishment for getting caught severe. Think public beatings, mutilation, exile, or death. Valuable tomb goods worth it. After all, the dead don't fight back, but it's not just the wealthy who got robbed. Even commoners' graves were disturbed. Poor Egyptians might have been buried with a small pot of beer or a loaf of bread for the afterlife. That was still worth stealing. Food was scarce, tools were valuable, and linen was currency. The irony? Tomb robbing wasn't just about greed. Sometimes it was about survival. Egypt went through famines, political treasure, but for so collapse and invasions, a hungry worker might break into a tomb not for food. And when your children are starving, a few funeral offerings look less like sacred objects and more like dinner rest in an ancient Egypt. You re-not safe just because you re-dead. Your tomb can be looted, your name erased, and your mummy in tombs. Birds' eyes, snakes' lotus flowers, unwrapped by some desperate soul with a pickaxe and poor moral judgment. Peace, only if no one knows where you're buried. We've all seen them. Some symbols represent entire words. And don't expect spaces majestic. Mysterious carvings on the walls of temples, men walking sideways like they're on a fashion runway. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, visually stunning and insanely difficult to learn. Sure, the ancient Egyptian writing was basically one long, beautiful riddle. If they re-facing right, re-right, facing look cool, but try reading them, hieroglyphs weren't just decorative art. They were a full-blown writing system with over 700 characters and growing. Others are sounds and many are determinatives, which clarify meaning, but the payoff huge. The trick look, because, writing the word star with an actual star symbol might be too straightforward. And protected from most manual labor, an I or punctuation with artistic flair, 0 vowels, and a deep need for context. Oh, and it can be. Literally, hieroglyphs were believed to have sacred for the written left to right, right to left, or top to bottom, depending on what the scribe felt like that day, at which way the birds or people are facing, that as your reading direction. Would you survive a single day in ancient Egypt? Let us be honest. Probably not sure. Left, read left. And if they're upside down, good luck. Learning to write hieroglyphs wasn't for commoners. Literacy was rare. Maybe 1% of the population could actually read and write. If you wanted and you had to become a scribe, which meant years of intense, you walked barefoot on blazing sand, hauled water cooked over. Your average Egyptian day started with a dirt floor, a cloud of flies, and education starting as a child. You'd memorize hundreds of symbols, copy endless scrolls, and practice so much that your hand probably curled into a claw by age 15. Scribes were respected wealth and never made to haul bricks under the sun. Instead, they wrote tax records, court documents, letters, and religious texts. Promotions, no career changes, no finding. They were essential to society. You were either a scribe, a farmer, a laborer, a mother, a servant, or a world where writing was power. Scribes ruled quietly from the shadows. Rest of the population, though, writing was something magical, but for a modern person without your heir, once you power. Writing someone's name preserved their soul, erasing it total spiritual. And if you were lucky, maybe 2 changes of annihilation. So yeah, spelling really mattered. So while hieroglyphs may look like ancient emoji, they're more like a linguistic Rubik's Cube wrapped in myth, math, and mystery. Beautiful, yes. Easy to learn, absolutely not. After 14 chapters of heat, hunger, sand, superstition, and backbreaking labor, it is time to ask the big question. It's easy to romanticize the ancient world, golden tombs, lotus-scented air. Graceful hieroglyphs gods with animal heads, and a thing for order and beauty, the stone serpent heads, but unlike most temples. But behind the iconic monuments and stunning art was a world of brutal realities that spared no one but the. It feels elite, the knowledge that if you didn't work, you didn't eat. Open fires lived shoulder to shoulder with bugs, smoke, and livestock. You worried about disease, divine punishment, and whether a snake might slither into your sleeping mat. You had no toothpaste, no medicine, no retirement plan linen. You served a god king who could take your land with a decree, a climate that cooked your skin by noon, and a religion that required you to pass a literal divine test after death just to get into the good version of the afterlife. Let's also not forget the things you didn't have. No antibiotics, no sunscreen, no privacy, no plumbing, no painkillers, and no easy escape or born into your class. That was it. Know yourself dead, and yet for all this, the ancient Egyptians weren't miserable. They believed deeply in their gods, their purpose, and the beauty of life. They loved music, dance, food, family, and festivals. They joked, they painted. They imagined eternity with enough clarity to build stone monuments that still stand today, conditioning your filtered water, your Advil, your sneakers, and your smartphone you'd fold before the second sandstorm hit. So no, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. But that's okay, because they lasted thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we still talk about them. In the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, one pyramid refuses to be forgotten. Its surface is adorned not with peaceful symbols of faith or gentle gods, but with snarling, open-mouthed stone serpents, dozens of them. They jet out from the temple's facade as if frozen in mid-strike fangs, bared eyes wide. This is the temple of the feathered serpent, known to many as the temple of Quetzalcoatl, that reach for the sky with reverence. This one feels different, predatory. From the moment you approach it, there is an eerie sense that you are being watched. Aren't mere decoration, they were warnings, symbols of divine wrath, and beneath their gaze, something horrific once unfolded. Excavations over the past few decades have revealed something that archaeologists didn't expect. Hidden beneath the temple's base were not just ceremonial offerings, but something far more disturbing: human remains, and not a handful. Over 200 bodies, many of them decapitated hands bound behind their backs. Young men, warriors, perhaps buried in groups, ritual sacrifices arranged with mathematical precision. Some were buried with obsidian knives at their sides, others with necklaces made of human teeth or jewelry crafted from jawbones. They weren't simply thrown into the ground, they were deliberately placed in positions of symbolic significance. It's clear this was no mass grave. It was a message, a divine transaction carved into stone and sealed with blood. But what kind of belief system justifies such horror, who demanded so many lives be taken at once? The Temple of the Fathered Serpent wasn't just a religious building, it was a theater of power, a place where rulers fused cosmology, warfare, and fear to maintain control over a city of more than 100,000 souls. And this ritual bloodletting may have been the cost of keeping the cosmos in balance. You were looking into the eyes of a civilization that believed the gods needed blood, and that they had. But who were these people who commanded such violence? As you stand before this temple today, gazing at those stone serpents, you're not just looking at art or architecture. Every right to deliver it and vanished without a trace. The answer lies in the shadows of Teotihuacan, before the mighty Aztec Empire, before the Maya carved their cosmic calendar. And when you walk its immense avenue of the dead, flanked by pyramids that scrape the heavens, you start to. It was a city meticulously. Its name, given by the later Aztecs, means the place where gods were into stone. There stood a city unlike any other in the ancient America's Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Born. Understand why. At its height, around 100 to 250 CE, Teotihuacan was a sprawling, we don't even know what they called themselves there, metropolis of over 100,000 people. making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time, rivaling ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an in size and influence plant-wide. Boulevards, gridded streets, apartment compounds, housing extended a theocracy or something altogether, families, multi-story structures made from volcanic stone, and at the center of it all, 3 massive pyramids. Sun and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here's what makes Teotihuacan different. No one knows who built it. Seriously, to this day, we don't. They were tools of control aligning perfectly with astronomical. But how to know the name of the people who constructed this place are no written records, no king's names carved into stone. Teotihuacan seems to a statecraft have been a society ruled not by a single monarch, but perhaps by a council foreign to our understanding of ancient power. And despite this anonymity, there but in Teotihuacan centuries before and at the heart. To understand the temple, you must first understand the influence was colossal. Evidence of Teotihuacan's power has been found hundreds of miles away from the Maya cities of Tekal and Copan to the distant Zapich capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, ceramic styles, murals, and even political meddling in one case. Teotihuacan chaos and order was to create something entirely cosmic, something emissaries may have helped overthrow a local Maya king to install a ruler more favorable to their interests. They maintained such a vast network. How did a city with no known writing system command such authority across Mesoamerica? The answer may lie in how they combined cosmic ideology. Their temples were more than places of worship events, serving as theaters of ritual sacrifice and reminding every citizen, either way they are, and every visitor that Teotihuacan was no ordinary city. It was the axis of the world, a sacred engine that kept time, fate, and blood flowing in sync. And Quetzalcoatl, the leader of it all, stood the temple of the feathered serpent deity. It was dedicated to the feathered serpent, known later by the Aztecs as Quetzal, Coatl, and to the Maya as Culcan. This figure is one of the most enigmatic gods in all of Mesoamerican mythology. The Aztecs rose to power. The feathered serpent was already a central, possibly supreme divine force. But here's the paradox. What kind of god is both a serpent and a bird? Think about that. Serpents slither through the underworld. They shed their skin, symbolizing rebirth, duality, and death. Birds soar high in the sky, closer to the sun, representing freedom, divinity, and life-giving wind. To combine these two, earthbound and sky-dwelling death and life, terrifyingly powerful. The feathered serpent wasn't just a god. He was a bridge between worlds. On the facade of the temple, carved in deep relief, we see dozens of his images, goggle eyes, bared teeth, plumed headdresses. Some historians believe these represent the god himself. Others suggest they're warriors or priestly figures adorned in divine regalia to signal their authority everywhere. The temple is covered in these snake-bird hybrids, as if the structure itself breathes with divine presence. But the feathered serpent wasn't just a god of the heavens. He was intimately tied to sacrifice. Blood was the fuel that kept the cosmos in motion. Remembered as a gentle, civilizing deity, had a much darker role in Teotihuacan. He demanded offerings, and not just of maize or incense, but of life itself. In some myths, he descended into the underworld to retrieve the bones of the dead and create humankind. But to bring life from death, there had to be a trade. The gods sacrificed themselves for humanity, and humans in return were expected to do the same. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a monument to faith. It was a cosmic engine designed to link the sky, the earth, and the underworld through ritual. Every stone, every serpent head, every buried victim fed into that system. Teotihuacan didn't just worship the feathered serpent. They embodied his logic, paradox, power, and blood, and the locals whispered legends, scholars made guesses, but no one could have. Most disturbing truths were hidden beneath the surface. For centuries, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stood silently, a weathered, imposing structure, swallowed by time, imagined what was buried beneath its layered stones. until archaeologists broke through in the late 1980s and early 2000s. What they found wasn't just unexpected, it was unsettling. Hidden beneath the temple's foundations were a series of long-sealed chambers and pits, each filled with carefully arranged human remains. These weren't the messy results of war or disease. These were deliberate sacrifices, systematic ritualistic cold, the victims numbering. Some were necklaces made of human. Over 200 were young men, many between 15 and 25 jawbones. Others had their hands tied behind their backs. A few were decapitated obsidian knives sharp, and the arrangement of the bodies followed geometric and symbolic patterns. Offerings surrounded the victims, black as night, were scattered nearby, the unmistakable tools of ritual slaughter. And this is where it gets darker, the Teotonos, It was as if every stone had to be consecrated with. They weren't buried randomly. They were placed in quadrants, cardinal directions. The deeper you possibly to mirror the cosmos, even the number of bodies mattered. It wasn't just about death. It was about meaningful death. The floor glimmered like jaguar bones, serpents, exotic shells from the distant Gulf Coast figurines. And was this a symbolic passage to the land of the dead, a mirror of the night obsidian blades that had never been used in battle? This wasn't punishment, it was a gift. These young men, most likely warriors, had been selected not to die in disgrace, but to die as part of something transcendent. The very act of building a temple may have required human sacrifice. Blood, every layer raised only after an offering had been made. Dig, the more sacrifice you find in one chamber. Archaeologists discovered elaborate tunnels filled with mercury and mica materials associated with the underworld. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sits directly along this avenue, walking at water when Venus rose or set wars were. Sky, the more they excavated, the more it felt like the temple was not built on top of death, but constructed to encase it. The blood didn't stain the stone by accident. The stone was meant to hold the blood, and all of it was for the gods. Some suggest the temple lines up with the equinox. Look closer at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and you'll notice something strange, something the walls were once. Unnerving, it doesn't just sit on the landscape, it aligns with the universe. To walk through it would be like combined with Mercury. Teotihuacan wasn't built randomly. The entire city was laid out along precise cosmic axes. Its central avenue of the dead runs at a 15 angle off true north, not a mistake. Even this temple not just a place of sacrifice, but a cosmic machine, but a deliberate shift, possibly to align with the setting of the Pleiad star cluster or the sun on specific ritual dates into a grand celestial blueprint. But why? What were they trying to align with? Archaeologists and arcoasters have debated this for decades. Sunrise. Others argue it connects to Venus, the planet most sacred to Mesoamerican civilizations, often associated with war, sacrifice, and rebirth. It was trying to speak to them. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a declared offerings made and temples. Activated with ritual fire temples, dimensions seem intentional. The repetition of the number 7, the number of visible planetary bodies, appears in its step platforms. There's symmetry, rhythm, and a stunning understanding of both earthly math and cosmic cycles, and beneath the surface, more clues. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered a tunnel beneath the temple. Not a crude passage, but a deliberately constructed subterranean world covered in powdered paille, a shimmering mineral that would have reflected light like starlight pools and microlined walls. The tunnel seemed designed to replicate the cosmos itself. Traveling through the Milky Way, a symbolic journey to the underworld, or perhaps to rebirth portal that aligned Earth, sky, and the spirit realm. Some scholars believe Teoti saw time as circular, not linear. Every ritual, every building, every sacrifice wasn't a one-time event. It was part of an eternal cycle, death leading to renewal, sacrifice, fueling rebirth. The temple's alignments may have helped predict celestial movements, coordinate harvests, and more importantly, time when to offer blood. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just looking at the stars. Spiritual beacon, It was a political weapon. Its very design was meant to overwhelm, to intimidate, to remind every viewer, local or foreign, who held the reins of power in Teotihuacan. Imagine standing in its shadow 1,800 years ago. You, a visitor from a smaller city-state, would arrive at the Avenue of the Dead, already eric by the sheer scale of Teotihuacan. But when you reached the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, you'd freeze. The serpent heads stare at you, their fangs bared jaguar symbols growl from the stone. The plaza had once held massive gatherings, not just for celebration, but for public ritual, and nothing stirs. You might even witness a sacrifice. The ruling elite of Teotihuacan understood something crucial: fear is power. Fear like divine wrath. By orchestrating ritual executions in broad daylight, surrounded by cosmic symbols and death imagery, they sent a clear message: gods are with us, and we are not afraid to feed them. But this wasn't chaos, this was theater. Priests in feathered headdresses and obsidian masks would chant, dance, and spill blood, turning cosmic myth into political performance. It wasn't just about pleasing the gods. It was about reminding everyone watching that the city's rulers had direct access to the people, looked up at the gods, at the rulers, at the sacrifices and divine. They alone could open the heavens or summon rain, protect the people, or destroy their enemies. Even the architecture helped reinforce this propaganda from the temple's upper tiers. In a world where gods ruled through fear, Teotihuacan position leaders could look down upon the plaza. They controlled not just the narrative, but the very physical space in which it unfolded. But around the year 550 CE, something broke. And the silence that followed was as knew their place, and for outsiders, Teotihuacan didn't need to conquer with swords. It conquered with symbols. Visiting dignitaries would carry home tales of awe and terror. They would speak of the feathered serpents, the endless avenues, the blood rituals that lit the signs that the cosmic engine was faltering. Evidence points to a long sky red, and then came the fire. Archaeologists have uncovered widespread the very systems that had itself as their chosen mouthpiece, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was the loudest voice of all. At its peak, Teotihuacan was the heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city of fire and stone, of gods and blood, a city that seemed destined to last forever. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, once a symbol of divine authority, was something changed. Chilling as the temple's stone serpent heads, the fall of Teotihuacan was not loud and glorious. It was gradual, then sudden. Signs of strain began appearing decades earlier. Period of drought, crop failure, and social unrest sustained this grand city, centralized power. Religious dominance, cosmic order. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They built their own myths around. Began to crack under pressure. The great rituals stopped. The ruling elite disappeared. The temple now burned layers across elite compounds, temples, and administrative buildings, including signs of violent destruction. And yet the mystery only deepened because, while the city faded for over 1,000 years, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent lay buried beneath layers of dust volcanic. At the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, what's strange is that the lower-S residential areas were mostly untouched. To them, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not a ruin. In the early 20th century, Mexican archaeologists began. What they found was astonishing, perfectly engineered. It was a relic of divine truth. This wasn't an external invasion. This was an uprising, a rebellion possibly. From within, the very people who once watched sacrifices in awe may have risen against. It had been deliberately closed off nearly 1 to 800 years earlier, as if to. One of the most dramatic discoveries came in 2011 when researchers uncovered a sealed tunnel. Their priest kings ransacked, sculptures were defaced, fires were set, ritual spaces were desecrated. And then silence. Teotihuacan wasn't completely abandoned after years of excavation scientists overnight, but it lost its soul. Trade networks collapsed, artistic production ceased longer, spoke, its memory endured. Centuries later, the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico and stumbled upon its ruins. They were Eric. They believed gods had built this place. its pyramids revering it as sacred ground, even as they had no idea who its original builders were. But the irony remains. The most powerful city of its time, built on cosmic order and blood, vanished without a written word, without a final record, leaving behind only stone and questions. The gods, it seemed, had gone quiet ash and silence. Locals avoided it, farmers tilled around it, and the world forgot it until the modern age of archaeology arrived and cracked open the secrets buried within its heart, excavating. Teotihuacan City, far older than the Aztecs, but it wasn't until the 1980s and 2000s that the temple itself began to yield its most intimate and most chilling revelations. Beneath the temple of the feathered serpent prevent anyone from entering ever again. Unearthed a cosmic corridor, a symbolic underworld, lined with pyite to mimic a starlit sky, pools of liquid mercury, and thousands of ritual objects, jade statues, rubber balls, obsidian blades, and even carved wooden masks. It felt less like a why would the ancient builders go to such lengths? What were they trying? Others tomb, and more like a message to preserve or hide. Some experts believe the tunnel was used in initiation rituals, the mercury ones. Suggest it symbolized the creation of the world, a mythological womb where gods were born, where kings were made, where the feathered serpent still lingered not just as a myth, but as the divine order was negotiated between humans and the cosmos. Thought to be only toxic, may have represented water or the fluid veil between worlds. And among all these glittering fragments was one persistent whisper. Presence in murals, in carvings, in the geometry of the temple itself. But even with all our tools, one truth remains. The temple still keeps serpent hadn't disappeared. It had coiled inward deep into the bones of the city, waiting to be rediscovered. And with each excavation, each uncovered jawbone, or tourists snap photos children run past. Golden ornament, we draw a little closer to its message, one carved not in language, but in stone sacrifice and shadow. Modern science has given us X-rays, drones, and ground-penetrating radar secrets. Today, the Temple of the Fathered Serpent stands as a haunting monument, not just to a civilization long gone, but to a way of thinking that merged power, cosmos, and death into one unbreakable system. The stone serpent heads, but the ground beneath. Their feet is soaked in 1,000 untold stories, and over 200. It has become a known human sacrifices, and still the temple endures. Its legacy is not just architectural. It's psychological, spiritual, cultural. The feathered serpent, it asks hard questions. How far? Go to feel connected to the divine. What happens when power and religion become indistinguishable? Would be adopted paradoxical god of sky and earth continued to evolve. He that civilizations can soar to impossible heights, while in many ways the temple isn't just a historical site, it is a mirror, by the Toltecs, then reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, where his myth took on a gentler tone, the bringer of knowledge, the god who wept for humanity, the one who vowed to return. This reimagining of the serpent god shows how myths don't die, they transform. Even in modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent persist in art and murals and literature and in national identity. The temple's image has appeared on coin stamps and even government buildings. Not to strike, but to remind us of what we once were, symbol of mystery, of pre-Columbian brilliance, and of the untamed spiritual world that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, one less visible, more uncomfortable. The Temple of the Fathered Serpent forces us to confront the price of belief, but these rudimentary drums will humans, so warned to summon. Or a celebration has begun, or the imagined tribe scattered across a dense forest. One beat from a cam beauty coexists with terror. Somewhere in that ancient repetition, something magical emerged. The reflection of us, our fascination with life after death, our hunger for meaning, our capacity to build monuments of staggering beauty and to stain them with blood. These ancient rhythms became a language of emotion, joy, grief, warning. The temple teaches us that greatness comes with shadows burying their secrets beneath the stones, and maybe that's why we keep returning. Because even when we had no words, we had rhythm, and that rhythm was not just to visit, but to understand. Because deep down, we know the before serpent is still watching. And what we still might be. Before we spoke in words, we spoke in rhythm tens of thousands of years ago. Long before the invention of writing, even before the birth of language itself, early humans began to create something that could only be described as sound with intention. Not speech, not melody, but rhythm. A hand slapping hollow bark, a stick tapping a stone, a foot stomping earth in time. First drum beat, it wasn't called music. It wasn't called anything, but it felt like something like communication, like movement. Like emotion taking form, anthropologists have uncovered evidence of primitive percussion instruments. Dating back over 30,000 years, these were likely made from natural materials, tree trunks, hollowed out gourds, stretched animal hides. Nothing fancy, nothing preserved. Were not toys or idle distractions. They served real purposes to connect distant drum, and others knew danger is coming, gods are listening. The earliest drums weren't just tools, they were extensions of the human body. A heartbeat externalized a pulse that could be felt across a valley. Drumming wasn't something you watched or listened to. It was something you participated in together around fires under stars and caves, where echoes made the air itself vibrate. Hope all expressed not in syllables or symbols, but in pattern. Sound the first flutes were carved before string instruments were dreamed of. The drum was already alive, anchoring us in time, giving shape to ritual, and uniting individuals into tribes. In that way, the drum became humanity's first instrument, and perhaps its first form of collective identity. No matter where on earth people lived, they created something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment. Everything in the cradle of early human civilization, drums were not just instruments, they were sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, But the purpose was nearly universal: to commune with the corner of the earth, developed its own rhythm, unseen. In Africa, where some of the world's earliest drums emerged, rhythm was deeply intertwined with life, death, and ancestry. The gam, carved from a single tree and wrapped in goatskin, was believed to contain three spirits. That of the tree, it was carved from the animal whose skin gave it voice, and the craftsman who brought it to life. Played in circles, the gem didn't just accompany rituals, it was the ritual. Then there were the talking drums, capable of mimicking human speech through pitch and tone from one village to the next. Long before the telephone, humans were already across the oceans, native. In West Africa, it was the heartbeat of Mother Earth, played in ceremonies to these drums. Carried messages across miles, relaying news, warnings, births, and deaths, drumming their messages through the landscape. American tribes treated the drum as a living entity, honor ancestors, summon healing, or guide the souls of the dead. The large POW drum, played by a circle of drummers, was both a musical and spiritual engine. To drum was to remember, to, in Australia, the Aboriginal. No sheet music, no stage, a communal pulse that aligned humans with nature and spirit in the Arctic. Inuit shamans struck frame drums to enter trance states, seeking visions or communicating. People used clapsticks and percussive stomps in the sacred dream time, a mythic era of an empires. Drums transformed into tools of domination, instruments of creation with spirits during long dark winters. These weren't performances, these were these drums with a single resonant. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were acts of survival, healing, storytelling, and connection. Drum was to belong. If you heard a drum in the distance, you knew, and always it was communal. Drums brought people together into sacred circles, synchronizing hearts and intentions. But no army wielded drums quite like the just bodies, moving hands, striking souls, stirring, all unified by rhythm. It didn't matter where on earth you stood, something sacred was happening, something that words alone could never express. European accounts described soldiers freezing in panic before even seeing the Ottomans. From sacred circles to bloody battlefields, The drum has always spoken, sometimes with comfort and sometimes with command. As human societies evolved into kingdoms, order, and weapons of fear, the earliest armies didn't have radios or megaphones. They had drums, and the drum, even under oppression, refused to be. Ancient China, massive drums called bao were struck to coordinate troops across vast terrains. Boom commanders could signal a charge retreat or a flanking maneuver. As civilizations branched out across continents, so too did their rhythms weren't just loud, they were strategic. Each rhythm meant something specific, and trained soldiers knew how to listen even through the chaos of battle on plantations rhythmic. Two worlds, two paths, one. But it was more used to announce rulers and summon the public. But in times of conflict, it was conversation. Each stroke had a name echoed through city walls, terrifying enemies with a deep, relentless thunder. So whether it signaled divine right, military discipline, or raw fear, the drummers moved with martial precision. Their stances in Japan, the Dao drum, emerged as it wasn't just percussion, it was psychological warfare. When the Romans marched, they brought with them the tympanum, a frame drum used in processions and by cults like that of Cybele, though not a battlefield instrument in the way horns and standards were, it carried symbolic power, a sound of empire discipline and order. Ottomans, their matab, bands the world's first known military. Orchestras unleashed an overwhelming storm of drums, cymbals, and horns before battles. The relentless pounding of cursed giant kettle drums and davul, double-headed bass drums struck terror into the hearts of enemy forces. Some paralyzed by sound, drums also enforced power off the battlefield. In royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe, drum ensembles announced arrivals, marked coronations, and underscored political rituals. To beat a drum was to declare power is present. Even enslaved people in the Americas used drums as tools of resistance communication, kept culture alive, and helped orchestrate secret rebellions. Silence, the drum has always carried a message. This is who rules. This is who marches. And this is the rhythm of power evolving in form, purpose, and philosophy. In the East, drums became tools of precision, spirituality, and ceremony. In the West, they leaned into military power and eventually orchestral grandeur, heartbeat. In India, the drum became a sacred instrument of divine. Language table, with its crisp tones and fluid grace, was used in classical music and devotional performances. Then accompaniment, meaning a syllabic identity. Indian drumming wasn't just percussive, it was spoken poetry trained over decades. The table player was not just a musician. He was a linguist of rhythm, a ceremonial giant, played in Shinto rituals, theater, and war Dao. Required not just technical skill, but physical discipline. Machines rise the physicality of a live drum kit. The sticks, the skins, the sweat remains irreplaceable. It's a symbol of modern rhythm, a fusion of centuries where tradition meets innovation and where one drummer can speak with 10 voices at once. The world beats in thousands of dialects, and so do its drums, from continent to continent. Culture to culture, the drum has taken countless forms, each carrying a distinct identity, sound, and purpose. These aren't just instruments, they're cultural. Its signature is crafted from local materials, shaped by local hands, and steeped in the rhythms of everyday life. In West Africa, the jaw remains a heartbeat of community gatherings. Speaks in sharp slaps and deep bass tones designed for storytelling and spontaneous conversation. Next, to it, the dandan provides the foundational pulse, a rhythmic anchor around which others can dance. In Africa, a drum ensemble isn't just music, it's a conversation between in the middle. East, the dabuka, a spirit's ancestors and the living. Goblet-shaped drum made from clay or metal delivers crisp, fast-paced rhythms essential to belly dancing and classical. Arabic music, its voice is sharp and articulate, demanding precision from its player and movement from its listeners across the Caribbean and Latin. America drums tell a different story, one born from resilience and fusion. In Brazil, the thunder of Sira. Conga bongo and timbre, reflect the blend of African indigenous and Spanish. Each influences, in Cuba, the sacred Bia drums are used in Santaya rituals. Each drum speaking a divine language tied to the Arishas, and Cuica drives samba parades through the streets, infusing joy into protest. Whether guiding dance, healing prayer, and carnival, their rhythms in India, the Mridangam and tablar, dominate South and North Indian classical music, respectively. These drums are so precise they are tuned to pitch, blurring the line between rhythm and melody. The physical gave way to the programmable finger. Movement matters. Each stroke carries centuries of tradition. Then there's the frame drum, one of the oldest in human history, appearing in everything from Persian daf to Irish bodhran from shamanic tools. Early devices like the two folk ensembles played with fingertips, mallets, or brushes. It's proof that even simplicity can be sacred. What unites them all purpose. Then came in 1980. Roland released the TR-808, a drum machine so iconic it's deep. Ritual or revolution, each drum reflects the soul of its people, carry geography, history, and identity. The global drum family isn't just diverse. It was about creating new sounds entirely. As digital audio progressed, so hip-hop, techno, electro, and trap, it's universal. Because no matter where you go, the earth still echoes with rhythm. As the 20th century drew to a close, the sound of drums began to change. Not in rhythm, but in texture. The sweaty palms, the wooden sticks, the calloused fingertips, all began to share. Artists could now rehearse. It was no longer about mimicking. Producers started layering human played. The organic and the synthetic found a groove together space with circuits, pads, and software. The age of digital drums had arrived. It began in the 1970s with primitive drum machines, Rhythmicon and Roland CR78, that used analog circuits to simulate basic beats. At first they sounded robotic, even awkward, but musicians saw something else: consistency, control, and endless possibility. The tools have changed, but the purpose remains the same: to move bodies. The drum remains our. Some feared this shift meant the death of traditional drumming, a replacement of revolution. It is the heartbeat we all share, not booming kick and crisp snare, would go on to define entire genres. From ancient fire circles to modern concert halls, from sacred rituals to digital, we're all born in part from its synthetic pulse. Acoustic drums did the tools, electronic drum kits like the Roland. Fat drums allowed drummers to play naturally while triggering thousands of sampled or synthesized tones. Silently record without microphones, and switch drum kits with the press of a button. It speaks in, and in the quiet spaces, and the drum has been our companion. And with computers came digital audio workstations, DAWs like Ableton, FL Studio, and Logic. Now anyone with a laptop could build complex rhythms, layering kicks, snares, hi-hats, and sub-bass into vast sonic architectures, finger drumming on mighty. Pats became an art form of its own human feel with cold precision, but that didn't happen. Instead, hybridity emerged. Acoustic drummers began integrating triggers and samples into their kids' drums with machine beats. Digital drums didn't erase the past. They reimagined it, and today we live in a world where a single person in a bedroom can build rhythms once requiring entire orchestras, where ancient grooves from Africa, Asia, and the Americas can be sampled, twisted, and given new life in neon-lit dance floors to shape. Time to make silence speak across every era, every empire, and every evolution in technology. One thing has never changed: oldest and most enduring voice dance floors. The drum has never been just about music. It's about connection to ourselves, to each other, to something bigger. Metaphorically, literally, because even before we're born, nestled in the womb, the first rhythm we ever hear is that of our mother's heart. Steady, safe, alive, and when life begins, we chase that rhythm forever through joy and war, through worship and protest. It has marched beside kings and risen with rebels. It has echoed through temples and subway tunnels. Every language, because it is a language, one that bypasses thought and speaks directly to the body, the bones, the blood. In moments of grief, we drum to mourn. In moments of ecstasy, we drum to celebrate. We drum to remember who we are. Today, percussion continues to evolve.